previous video, we learned the very basics of the font face rule. However, there's still more to learn. So here you can see we have the same page that we were using in previous videos. And if we switch over to our text editor, we're using the same HTML markup. Nothing's changed there. And we also have the same CSS that we left off with. Now, the next thing that you're probably wondering about fonts is, how can I include multiple fonts into the same web page? Well, that's actually pretty easy. So we'll go ahead and just copy this font face rule here, and we'll go ahead and paste it in, and we'll just change our Orbitron font to say chunk. And then of course we need to change the file name here, and we'll change that to chunk with a capital C. And then we'll go ahead and select our first paragraph. And in order to do that, we'll use the nth child pseudo selector, and we'll give it a value of 1 to go for the first one. And then we'll use the font family property, and we'll give it the value chunk. And one other tip, we should actually be putting these in single quotes, so we'll just go ahead and do that now. And this is really just a safety precaution. So we'll go ahead and save that, and when we switch over to the browser and refresh the page, you can see that we now have two different fonts on the same web page. And again, this is fully selectable text. This isn't using any kind of images or any CSS hacks. Now, what we've created so far is pretty good, but there are a few problems. We're using the OpenType format, or .otf, when Internet Explorer needs the embedded OpenType format, or .eot. It is just Internet Explorer that needs this file format. All other browsers are okay with using either the normal OpenType format, like we're using here, or the TrueType format. Now I should also note that some older browsers that don't have normal font face support can even fall back to SVG, and this is the case in earlier versions of Google Chrome. But Internet Explorer is still an issue here. So what are some possible solutions? Well, we could include Internet Explorer conditional comments somewhere in our HTML markup in the head. But that can get pretty messy pretty quickly. So another thing that we could do in our CSS is use what's called the format hint. So right after one of our source URLs here, we could go ahead and type format, and then give it the value OpenType. And then we can specify multiple sources and formats like this. So right after our OpenType here, we could go ahead and put a comma. And we don't actually have this file, but let's just go ahead and say we had an EOT version of chunk. So we'll say chunk.eot, and then we'll give it the format EOT. And there we have it. Easy, right? Well, unfortunately, that doesn't actually work either. Internet Explorer doesn't quite understand this format hint, and I'll explain why in just a little bit. Like I said before, and as you can probably tell by now, this is a bit more complicated than it seems. Fortunately, other people have encountered this problem before, and they've come up with some pretty nifty solutions. So let's go ahead and switch over to the browser here. Here we have the blog of Paul Irish, and Paul Irish has come up with some pretty bulletproof font face syntax. Now we'll go ahead and copy and paste the syntax that he has here, and then we'll go ahead and walk through it and explain each part. So we'll go ahead and paste it in here, and we'll just go ahead and comment out the font face rule that we've already created. Actually, we need to comment out both of these. And again, we don't actually have these fonts, but right now we're just looking at the syntax. So here we're specifying multiple source URLs, and actually let's go ahead and separate these with spaces so that we can see each one of these. There we go. And as I mentioned before, Internet Explorer doesn't quite understand this format hint. And the reason it doesn't understand it is because it's actually parsing just this part of the source URL. So let me go ahead and just create a comment here, and I'll type out what Internet Explorer is actually requesting when it looks at this. So it'll grab the font, just like we have there, and it'll go ahead and get the right format, but then it will try to put a space in there, and then it will just continue on with the source URL with format and open type and so on. Now, we're actually in a safe situation here because of this question mark. What that question mark does is it throws away the whole rest of the URL. It's still attached and Internet Explorer still sees it, but it just treats it as a whole bunch of URL parameters that don't actually mean anything, so it will still get the source URL of the font and it won't 404 out. So that's good. Once Internet Explorer has grabbed this first font here, then the rest of the browsers can pick up on the multiple sources. That about wraps things up for the font face rule. In the next video, we'll start learning about font services.